In the dimly lit Gray District Agency office, the investigators Stanley, Tracie, and Chris gather around the office desk, their eyes fixed on a dossier detailing a gruesome case of loss of lives. A malicious beast born from nightmares savagely unalived two unsuspecting men during a treacherous hunting expedition deep within the heart of the Minnesota's North Woods. Witnesses whispered a creature with antler-like horns, his eyes burning like sulphurous flames, and his grotesque claws thirsting for more flesh, standing at an unnatural height of 7 feet tall. Stanley asked Claire,
Claire, can you narrow down what this could be using the case files?
According to the Gray District Agency's database, there's a 95% chance that it's a Wendigo. A Wendigo is a beast-like humanoid creature that possesses people when they give in to taboo practices, like greed, excess, and particularly cannibalism. While scholars believe that the Wendigo began with the first humans. Wendigos are said to be cursed to wander the land, eternally seeking to fulfill their voracious appetite for human flesh. The creature is said to have several powers, such as the Wendigo's senses of sight, smell, and hearing are greatly enhanced, comparable to those of many predatory animals. The Wendigo can see clearly in total darkness. As the Wendigo grows older, its powers over nature increase exponentially. Wendigos are incredibly strong, even by monster terms. They can tear humans limb from limb, snap necks and carry two people at once, and even drag them up a tree with ease. They are considered to be among the strongest of creatures. Also, they have the power of immortality. Wendigos can heal rapidly from any wound that is not caused by fire or a magical weapon containing silver.
An unsettling silence settles in the room as the agents exchange weary glances. Knowing that they are facing a malevolent entity born from the darkest aspects of human nature, it causes the agents to become very nervous. Stanley said,
We have some silver-tip arrows. Tracie, can you conjure up a spell for the arrows so they can only weaken the Wendigo?
Tracie replied.
Yes, I could do that.
Stanley explained.
Once it's weakened, I will have a chance to contain it. Let's grab the bow and silver-tip arrows and head into the North Woods.
Tracie went to go cast her spell. Chris said,
Why the arrows and not the fire?
Stanley replied.
The arrows are more stealthy and not so hazardous.
Tracie came back and asked Chris,
Chris, are you coming? If we don't stop this Wendigo, who will?
Chris replied.
Okay, I'm in. But just so you know, I'm scared out of my mind.
Please subscribe, like, and share this video with your friends. The agents armed themselves with bows and silver-tip arrows. They set out into the frigid, snow-covered wilderness. Stanley said,
This is where it was last seen.
Chris said,
It's freezing out here. We forgot to bring out warm clothes.
The forest seems to tighten around them. Evil hangs heavy in the air, igniting a primal fear deep within their souls. Chris screamed. They hear something large running through the snow. Tracie said,
Chris, it's just a deer.
Chris asked,
Are we sure about this? I mean, this Wendigo is like huge and wicked. And to top it off, it eats people.
The atmosphere thickens as the group continues into the forest. The moon is sitting behind dark clouds, casting eerie shadows across the dense trees. Stanley replied to Chris,
Chris, we could do this. We're members of the Gray District Agency.
Chris replied,
You're right. Let's do this.
The agents pressed on. Suddenly, Stanley crouches down, examining a set of strange footprints. Stanley said,
Look at these footprints. They're huge and oddly shaped. I'm not sure what animal left these.
Chris mentioned.
I used to track and hunt with my uncle, and I don't know what those prints come from.
Tracie said,
We must be close. Keep your head on a swivel. The Wendigo is probably watching us right now. Come on, let's go.
The agents proceeded on. Chris said,
Did y'all hear that? There's something moving over there.
Stanley whispered,
Be quiet, Chris. We don't want to scare it off. Y'all stay ready.
The forest is alive with tension. Each eerie sound causes them to get nervous. They spotted a glimpse of a massive, hairy figure moving through the trees. Tracie said,
That's the Wendigo.
The forest seems to hold its breath as the trio watches in horror. Stanley whispered,
Take a shot now.
The agents missed, and the Wendigo ran off. Chris said,
It's not as scary as I thought it was.
Stanley mentioned,
It's only because it was far away from us. You couldn't really see its flesh-thirsty fangs and ferocious eyes and large claws.
Chris looks worried. Tracie said,
Stanley, are you trying to scare Chris?
Stanley answered,
I'm just messing with him. But we are going to have to get closer to make the shot without getting eaten.
The team went further into the forest. Chris screamed. A deer ran between the trees. Stanley said,
Chris, calm down. It's just another deer. Let's keep going. There's a clearing just ahead of us.
The agents stumbled upon a clearing. The moon hung in the sky, casting an eerie glow on the landscape of jagged rocks. Stanley said,
Look, there's a cave over there. It must be living in that cave. What is that?
Tracie said,
I think you're right, Stanley. That scream came out of that cave.
In an instant, the Wendigo is standing at the mouth of the cave, but he doesn't see the GDA agents. Chris is so scared, he wets his pants. And the Wendigo went back into the cave. Stanley asked Chris.
Dang, Chris. It scared you that bad?
Chris replied,
Yeah, that's so embarrassing. And I didn't bring another pair of pants. Now I'm really going to freeze.
Tracie said,
We're family, Chris. We're not going to tell anyone. But you're still going to freeze.
Stanley asked Chris.
Chris, go over there and draw it out of the cave.
Chris said,
Man, what? That's crazy. I'm not going over there.
Stanley replied.
Chris, don't worry. We will protect you.
Chris said,
What if you miss? Then what?
Stanley answered,
If we miss, we will light as many arrows as possible, and the fire will scare it away.
Chris said,
If it comes down to that, y'all better light this whole forest on fire to stop that thing from eating me. All right, I'm gonna go do it.
Chris walked near to the cave. He mumbled to himself.
Man, why I always have to be the bait? Anyways, what am I supposed to do to get this thing to come out of the cave?
Chris stood there looking at the cave. Chris said,
Hello? Hello? Man, this is so jacked up.
They came running out of the cave, straight for Chris. It was then that Tracie and Stanley, brave yet scared, raised their bows and aimed their arrows at the creature. tension hanging heavy in the air as the agents focus on the Wendigo. Tracie and Stanley fired upon it. It's a direct hit. The Wendigo fell to the ground. Chris came back. Chris said,
I'm not doing nothing like that again.
The GDA containment unit retrieved the Wendigo and transferred it to an unknown location called the Gray Area.
Two hours later, we're still waiting. The Goatman came out of nowhere, grabbed Chris, and started to drag Chris into the woods. As Tracie, Chris, and I were in the Great District Agency mobile lab, a terrifying report came in over the GDA radio.
A monstrous creature, at least 8 feet tall, was roaming the forests of Maryland. The creature was described as standing on 2 legs with dark matted fur covering its body. Its eyes were said to glow a piercing yellow in the darkness of the forest, and it also has long, sharp teeth stained with the blood of its victims. The creature was said to move with fluid grace, almost like it glided through the trees. It was known to prey on livestock, and farmers reported missing animals on a regular basis. Deep in the forest, the bones of the missing livestock were found, with teeth marks that didn't match any known animal. As reports of missing livestock and strange bone discoveries continued to pour in, the people of Maryland lived in a state of constant fear. No one knew when or where the creature would strike next, always looking over their shoulders for any signs of the beast. But the creature was not content with just attacking livestock. It was said to have also taken human lives, leaving behind only mangled corpses and a trail of terror. And the people of Maryland are at the mercy of this terrifying monster, and no one knows how to stop it.
I asked Claire, did you hear that? Claire said,
Yes, it's a creature called the Goatman. The Goatman is a beast that is said to be a hybrid of a man and a goat derived from a farmer's daughter who is a biophysicist who merged her embryo DNA with a goat's DNA. The Goatman was first seen in 1957. It's a half-human, half-goat creature that is said to roam the forests and stalk bridges of Maryland. The Goatman has horns and claws and is swift, agile, tall, and stands upright. It is also said to be very strong and to have human-like intelligence. It also has the ability to communicate with humans. There are 2 known types of the Goatman. One is a darkish red, aggressive and dangerous, and it is said to attack and kill people who venture into the woods at night. It eats people and animals. There's also a brown one, which is peaceful, benevolent, and helps people that are lost in the woods. It feeds on plants and grasses. There is nothing in the GDA database on how to capture it.
I said, well, it looks like we have another case. It's only a matter of time before the creature strikes again. This case may be our most difficult one yet, since the beast thinks like a human. As we drove deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to grow thicker and darker. The road was narrow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. We arrived at the site of the latest attack. I couldn't believe my eyes! The creature had slaughtered cows, leaving behind nothing but blood and bones. The ground was littered with the remains of dead animals, and the air was thick with the smell of death. We heard a growl coming from the shadows of the trees. We knew the creature was close, and we were terrified. We could hear the creature's growls and howls louder and louder behind us. The whole forest sounds very alive. Chris said, it looks real creepy out here. Tracie said, boo! Chris screamed. Chris said, don't do that. Tracie said, I was just joking. I asked, do y'all remember the case when we caught a 15-foot tarlin? Chris and Tracie said, yeah. I said, let's use a cow for bait like we use for the tarlin. Chris said, we can put the cow in the cage and it will lure the Goatman into the cage. Tracie said, that might not work, but I'll go get the bait. Chris said, I'll get the cage. We set everything up and waited patiently, watching the cow from a safe distance while hiding in some bushes. Chris scared Tracie. I said, y'all need to stop playing. It's going to hear you. Tracie said, Chris's trap is not going to work. Chris said, we will see. Tracie rolled her eyes. We knew that the Goatman was a stealthy and cunning creature, so we had to be careful not to be seen by it. We heard the sounds of the Goatman in the distance, coming closer and closer. Finally, the Goatman emerged from the forest, and it was the red one. It crept up to the cow slowly, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It looked at the cow for a few minutes and walked away. Tracie said, see, I told you, it thinks like a human. You can't catch it in a cage. I said, you're right, Tracie. I have an idea. We can set up a remote control electrical fence that surrounds a 2,000 square foot area. The fence's walls will lie flat on the ground, camouflaged with leaves and branches. When the Goatman enters the 2,000 square foot area, I will press the remote, and the fence walls will rise up, connecting together and activating the electricity. As far as the cow goes this time, we will let the cow walk around freely inside the trapped area, so it doesn't look like we put the cow there. When the Goatman enters the area with the cow, it won't even realize it's standing in a trap. The cow should stay in the middle of the trap because there's plenty of grass growing that it can eat. We set the trap up. Tracie, Chris, and I hid in the bushes again, waiting for it to return. 2 hours later, we're still waiting. The Goatman came out of nowhere, grabbed Chris, and started to drag Chris into the woods. Then the brown Goatman appeared. The red Goatman let go of Chris and ran into the forest. And the brown Goatman also went back into the woods. Chris said, that thing was gonna eat me. I'm glad the brown one showed up and scared it off. I said, Chris, you would have been a goner if the brown one didn't help you. Claire said,
there has been a sighting nearby.
I pulled Claire, the Great District Agency AI, out of my pocket. And Claire said,
a farmer called in and said a creature tried to get one of its cows. He shot at it and missed, and it ran off back into the woods heading in your direction.
I asked Claire, call all the farmers in the area to tell them to lock up all animals in their barns tonight.
Okay.
Tracie said, that's good. It wasn't able to get the farmer's cow. Now we know it's hungry and heading this way. I had nervously set up a surveillance camera in the nearby trees. Then I retreated to the safety of the mobile laboratory with Tracie and Chris. As we anxiously huddled around the monitor, we could hear the distinct, bone-chilling cries of the infamous Goatman echoing through the darkness. But even within these walls, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Suddenly, the sound stopped, and we searched the monitor for any signs of the monster. But all we saw was a peaceful cow grazing in the distance. The Goatman began furiously throwing its weight against the lab, causing the walls to shake and rattle with terrifying growls. Just as suddenly as it began, it stopped, leaving us with only the sound of its heavy breathing and the pounding of our own hearts. Then we heard the banging on the side of the lab again, as if the Goatman was trying to break in. Then it went silent again. Chris asked, Stanley, it can't get in here, can it? I said, no, the lab is reinforced with a rare metal recovered by the GDA from a crashed UFO. Tracie said, "There it goes. It's in the trap." I quickly pressed the button on the remote. Then we went to go take a look.
"Let me out of here!"
The Goatman screamed and growled. At last, we caught the Goatman.
Several reports came into the Gray District Agency about a creature seen in Lake Township, Michigan, in the heart of the Manistee National Forest. The report describes a 7-foot-tall beast with a dog's head and a torso of a man. It is also described as having blue or yellow eyes, with an eerie howl that sounds like a man's scream. Stanley, Tracie, and Chris are out on the case. Stanley said,
According to the report, it sounds like it might be a dog man. They are known to be in this area. But it also can be a werewolf. We won't know since it is a full moon.
Tracie and Chris have a curious look on their face. So Tracie asked,
What's a dog man?
and Chris said,
Yeah, what is a dog man? It sounds like a werewolf to me.
Stanley asked Claire, the Great District's AI.
Claire, probably you can explain it better than I can. What is a dog man, and what's the difference between it and a werewolf?
Werewolves shapeshift from a human to beast, and dogmen don't. Dogmen do not have advanced healing properties like werewolves. Werewolves are susceptible to silver, whereas dogmen do not have a vulnerability. People can become werewolves if bitten by one. Dogmen are not able to pass on a curse like a werewolf. They tend to stick to temperate regions with access to fresh water and game. Their favorite food source is deer, but cattle, sheep, and goats are also highly sought prey. But if their food source is scarce and hungry enough, they will attack humans. For the most part, dogmen have tracking abilities like a bloodhound. They do have a larger snout than scent hounds, so their tracking abilities are more robust and can track down to 1 particle per billion. That's similar to a great white shark's ability. Dogmen are also more intelligent than a dog, though not at the level of a human. When chasing their prey, they can think ahead or even make rudimentary traps. In general, these monsters prefer to hunt alone.
Tracie said,
Look over there. It's a cabin. Let's go take a look.
Chris said,
Here we go again.
The investigators started walking towards the cabin. There's howling in the distance. They stopped in their tracks and looked at each other. Stanley said,
Sounds like a pack of wolves. Come on, let's keep going.
The woods are very much alive, with eerie sounds coming from all around them. They made it to the cabin. Stanley looked at the decaying structure, and with a tremor in his voice, he uttered,
This place is run down. Let's go inside. We might find some clues.
Chris said.
Huh? What? Wait a minute.
Tracie is pissed off at Chris.
Chris, just wait out here. Darn scaredy cat.
Tracie and Stanley entered the house. The place is cold, dark, and creepy. Chris is outside, scared and looking around. Chris screamed. Stanley and Tracie's eyes got big and said,
No, not Chris!
They ran outside to check on Chris. Tracie said,
Chris, what's wrong?
Chris is scared and shaking. He said,
There's something over there, next to the tree.
They see something that's dark and shadowy with glowing eyes. It started running towards the team. The investigator screamed and ran into the cabin. The creature is pounding and clawing at the door. creating an unsettling noise of terror. All of a sudden, there is silence. The beast stopped trying to get in. Stanley said,
We need to turn this around. It needs to be trapped in here, not us.
Chris said.
Do you think it's gone?
Stanley said,
I don't know, Chris. Why don't you go out there and look? Not me.
Stanley stared at Chris with a mean look and said,
Well, I'm not going to pull rank this time, and we can't stay in here forever. I'll go.
Tracie is worried and said to Stanley.
Keep your head on a swivel, Stanley.
Stanley peeped outside the door. Then he walked out there. Chris is feeling relieved that he didn't have to go out there. He said to Tracie,
Tracie, how do you think we're going to catch this thing? Somehow we're going to trap it in here, Chris.
Stanley returned. He said,
You can relax, Chris. It's gone. We're going to have to trap it here in the cabin. This place should be able to hold it.
The agents hear something outside the door. Their eyes widen. Stanley said,
It's back. Okay. This is what we're going to do. Since I'm the fastest, I will open the door and let it in. Then we will all run out the back. Chris, you lock that back door. And Tracie, you run around to the front and lock that one. Then we should have it.
The team gets ready. Stanley opens the door. The beast rushes in, and the team runs to the back door, and the beast chases them. They made it out the back door, but Chris forgot to lock it. Stanley and Tracie ran one direction, and Chris ran another, screaming, with the beast right behind him.
Help me! Help!
Stanley yelled to Chris,
Chris, go back in the cabin, and I'll open the front door.
Chris yelled.
Okay. Tracie, lock the back door when Chris and the creature runs in. Okay, I'm on it.
Chris and the beast ran into the house. Tracie locked the door. And Stanley opens the front door. Chris runs out. Stanley quickly closes and locks the door. Chris walks over. Stanley said,
Chris, stay here. Tracie and I are going back to the campsite. I was able to get some of his hair. We need to test it to find out what it is. While I'm doing that, Tracie's going to call the GDA containment unit to come get it.
Chris said,
Okay, but please hurry up so we could get out of here.
Tracie and Stanley headed back to the campsite. While they were gone, the beast stopped his horrid noise.
Hello? What the?
Chris heard a voice from inside the cabin.
Hello? Is someone out there?
It unlocked the door. Chris slowly backed away from the door and thought to himself that it can't be the beast. Its claws is too big to turn the lock or grab the doorknob. The door opened. A guy walked out, clean dressed, and asked Chris.
May I help you?
Chris didn't say a word, and the man said,
I hope you're not here when I come back.
The man walked off. Stanley and Tracie were on their way back, and the lab results said it was unidentifiable. The same guy walked past them and said,
How are y'all doing today?
Tracie said,
Fine. Okay, that was strange. Let's hurry up and get back to Chris.
Stanley said.
I hope he's okay.
Stanley and Tracie runs back to Chris. Tracie asked Chris.
Did someone walk by here? And Chris, why is the door open?
Chris said.
That guy came out of the cabin. And I looked inside, and I didn't see the creature anywhere in there.
They paused and looked at each other and said,
That was a werewolf? Don't run, Chris.
Chris runs for it. Tracie yells at Chris.
Give it back, Chris!
Then Tracie and Stanley had to run for their lives. The dragon released its fire. As the sun peaks over Albanian's mountains, the investigators of the Great District Agency embarked on a disturbing journey to unravel the mystery shrouding Europe's mountains. Their mission is to investigate the gruesome reality of multiple people being consumed by flames, leaving behind nothing but charred bones and ash. At the time of each incident, witnesses said they saw a large bird flying near the Albanian Alps. A few months before the terror began, there were reports that an opening to a cave appeared in the mountain, and there are rumors of gold treasures in the caves. Stanley, Tracie, and Chris are on their way to the location. Chris asked Stanley,
Stanley, are we heading over there? Yeah, Chris. The cave is just on the other side of those mountains.
They arrived at the mouth of the cave. An unnatural quiet hangs heavy in the air, broken only by the occasional drip of unseen water echoing from within. The team ventured into the cave. Inside is a stale smell of smoke, sulfur, and pumice that stings your nostrils. It's a smell that also speaks of something else, something primal and unsettling. A bat flies over their heads, and Chris and Tracie scream. Tracie says,
Oh, Lord, I don't do bats, Stanley. Tracie, don't worry. They're not going to mess with us unless they have rabies. Keep playing. I'll leave y'all right in here by yourselves.
Chris said,
You telling me out of all the creatures we investigated, and you're scared of a bat, Tracie? Yeah, and you're scared too. By the way, you're scared of everything, Chris. At least I'm consistent, Tracie. Well, you're right about that, Chris.
Stanley said,
All right, y'all. There are multiple tunnels in this cave. Let's start out by going this way.
The team walked over to another area of the cave. They came upon a cavern that appears to have a large opening that led to another world inside the mountain. A deep, menacing growl vibrated out the shadows. Chris immediately started shaking uncontrollably. Stanley and Tracie were also frightened by the growl. They looked around, confused, and didn't know where the sound came from. Tracie said,
That sounds like it's something huge.
A loud roar sounded like it was right next to them. They screamed and ran. Somehow they ended up separated in caverns among the cave system. Stanley called out to Tracie and Chris, and they did the same.
Tracie! Chris! Where are you? Stanley! Chris! Stanley! Chris! Stanley! Tracie!
Stanley asked Claire, the Great District Agency's AI, for more information about this creature. Claire said,
According to what you described, it's possibly a red dragon. When dragons are in the presence of gold, it amplifies their mythical prowess. It is said that dragons consume gold to maintain their vitality and magical abilities, making it an essential part of their existence. Gold helps to break down the shell of dragon eggs so they can hatch. Dragons also sleep on gold and jewels, and their weight embeds them in their skin to provide additional armor. Losing even one coin or tiny trinket could cause a red dragon to fly into a rage and hunt down and mercilessly destroy the supposed thief. If they could not, then they would rampage across the land, slaughtering all they encountered and devastating local settlements where a thief might hide. Red dragons also gain an array of magical powers as they age.
Over where Chris is at, Chris notices something out the corner of his eye. It's shining. As he looks, he realizes it's a pile of gold treasure. But the fascination of the gold is instantly stopped by terror. Behind the glittering treasure, a monstrous nest sprawled, dwarfing a small house with something sitting in the center of the nest. Chris' throat constricted. Those weren't rocks. They were enormous, scaly eggs. Over where Tracie's at, Tracie hears something moving. She quickly hides behind a boulder. She looks left and right, kneeling behind the rock, as the sound gets closer and closer. Tracie screamed. It was Stanley, and he said,
"What are you doing, Tracie? I thought you were some animal, Stanley." "Nah, but I didn't mean to scare you, Tracie." "Is Chris with you?" "No, I was thinking y'all was right behind me." "Tracie, Claire think it's a dragon." "Huh? A dragon?" "Yeah, we have to go find Chris before it does."
Tracie and Stanley went looking for Chris. Chris came running by them, screaming, and Stanley and Tracie didn't ask any questions and started running right along with Chris. They made it to a cavern. Stanley asked Chris,
"Why were you running, Chris?" "A spider was crawling on me." "Really? A spider, Chris?" "Yeah, it could have bitten me. But anyway, I found some gold coins and a huge bird nest about the size of a house."
Stanley said.
"It's not a bird's nest. Claire think it's a dragon, Chris." "A dragon?"
Chris takes them to see what he had found.
"See, look." "Wow."
Unknown to the agents, the dragon was watching them and hidden from their view. The dragon said,
"I smell soon-to-be-burnt humans. Do you also come here to steal my gold, Stanley?"
"No. Where are you? And how do you know my name?"
"I've been watching and listening to all of you."
Tracie asked,
"Are you saying everyone that you burnt up was trying to steal your gold?"
"No, Tracie. They also tried to steal my eggs."
"Stanley, Chris, I think we should leave and quarantine this mountain and label it as a gray area so no one tries to steal its eggs and gold again."
"You cannot leave. It's time for you to burn."
"Why?"
"The one you call Chris has stolen from me."
Tracie and Stanley looked at Chris. Chris takes a gold coin out of his pocket. Then the dragon steps into view. Stanley said,
"Don't run, Chris."
Chris runs for it. Tracie yells at Chris.
"Give it back, Chris."
Then Tracie and Stanley had to run for their lives. The dragon released its fire to burn them. They could feel the searing heat of its fiery breath scorching the air around them. They escaped from the dragon. Stanley said,
"Chris, why did you take the coin?" And why you didn't give it back? You're going to get us all burnt up, man.
I don't know why I did that, Stanley.
Well, Chris, you put us in a heated situation. And you know what I mean by heated.
The dragon is standing next to them and about to fry them right where they stand when Tracie said,
Wait! He will give it back right now! Give it back, Chris!
Okay.
Chris lays the coin on the ground.
Here's your coins back.
The team makes a break for it and runs to the mobile lab. Stanley is on the phone with the general counsel at the GDA's headquarters, asking them how should they proceed with the case, since the dragon was only protecting his eggs and gold. Stanley said,
Well, y'all, the council said we have to capture it.
Tracie said,
What? It wasn't the dragon's fault. I know, Tracie, but it's our orders. I need you on board with this. We will need your powers to help catch it. I'm on board, but dragons are magical beings. They can block my spells. I'm not sure if it will work, Stanley. We're going to bring our weapons with us, just in case.
The agents went back to the entrance of the cave. Stanley said,
I have an idea. We will have to stun it with our laser weapons to weaken it. Then, Tracie, we will need you to work your magic to contain it. But first, we need Sticky Finger Chris to steal another coin and lure it out of the cave so we have more room to catch it. Man, I'm never going to hear the end of that. And of course, I'm bait again. Thanks, Stanley. You're welcome, Chris. After you get the dragon outside the cave, Tracie and I will take it from there, Chris.
Huh? Y'all not coming with me?
No, Chris. We have to get ready out here. We got to catch this thing.
Chris went into the cave. He's trying to remember where the gold is. He's walking from one section to the next. Chris finds the gold, but the dragon is there. So Chris hid behind some rocks and waited for the dragon to leave. The red dragon slowly walked away. Chris went for it. As soon as he grabbed the coin, the dragon came after him, and Chris ran. He made it outside, screaming. Stanley and Tracie was ready, but the dragon wasn't behind Chris. Then the dragon came out of nowhere and grabbed Chris. Stanley and Tracie started shooting at it, but they missed, and it flew away with Chris. Now they're worried. What will happen to Chris? Tracie said,
Let's go back inside. There must be another entrance where the dragon has taken Chris. Yeah, you're right. Come on, let's go.
Tracie and Stanley ventured back into the cave. They made it to the dragon's nest, but they didn't see any signs of Chris or the dragon. They heard a sneeze. Then they seen Chris poking his head up out of the dragon's nest. Chris said,
We need to hurry up. It will be back soon.
Stanley said,
Chris, get out of the nest. We're going to go ahead with the plan right here. Let's hide, and I'll let everyone know when to stun the dragon. Then, Tracie, you work your magic.
They hid behind the boulders. Stanley said,
It's back. Get ready.
The dragon noticed Chris was missing.
Where are you? I can smell you, Chris. And I smell that you're not alone.
Stanley yelled.
Stun it! Stun it now!
The dragon went limp, and Tracie started her spell.
Sutabuna Makanash,
Tracie is fighting and fighting, trying to hold it. Then she said her final spell. Then Stanley attempts to stun it again. They did it.